Good morning, LinkedIn. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Let's Build Daily. I'm your host, Chris Carolan. Super special guest today, Emerson. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Yeah, good to be here.
Uh, you know, this is one of those topics I know needs to be talked about. And I'm only talking about it just because there's so many people having challenges, related to the leads object. But it's been really enlightening for me, like why the gaps have been where they have been when you look at the leads object and how it can be like inserted into the strategic use of HubSpot. So super happy you could stop by and join us today. I know you've been working a lot on this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm this is something I love talking about this stuff. So I'm very glad to be here.
Exactly. So we're gonna focus on, you know, a little bit, probably a little more conceptual today. We might uh, make our way into HubSpot to highlight some changes, that have happened recently. If you look in certain settings places, but I wanted to start with, you know, kind of the why, like why I'm allergic to the word leads and would rather just be done with it. Is that it just in my opinion, it drives all the wrong behavior. It removes humanity, from the process. Because if you're a buyer yourself, like being called a lead, doesn't feel good. You immediately feel like a number, right? And in reality, we could use different labels, like, related to what we think, the buyers are doing. So this is like a, best case scenario for me. Like if we just get rid of the old way and brought in the new way, like, we have this process, this customer life cycle. We've been talking about life cycle stages a lot. You know, they're looking to learn something. They find they have a problem. They start researching ways to, solve the problem. They might, find your content and say, hey, I need to solve this. So I'm in the market and I want to talk to you guys. So they're raising their hands. Um, you get a chance to talk to them, and depending on where they converted, you might understand their high intent like right away. And this, opportunity or deal stage, processes, has always been, if somebody's good at managing this, this whole life cycle journey, this is usually where they are good because it relates to, specific sales metrics and data. Um, but then so often we get to customer, we're like, all right, all good. Let us know when you need us. Um, but then on the flip side, we have goals like, hey, when are you going to buy more? Hey, do you know anybody else that's going to buy? Um, hey, we got this new thing. You should buy it right away because it's better than your old thing. Um, if these adoption advocate, champion, if they haven't felt any of this, they're unlikely to help you with any of those goals. Um, but this is like a world where the term lead doesn't exist. So I always have challenges in explaining this to people. Emerson is a little bit more, I guess, practiced and compassionate than I am. So I'm gonna ask him to share his thoughts, and he's got a great model that we can actually walk through this with.
Yeah. So, I share your feelings on how we work with the customer. Definitely not treating them as a lead, like all that stuff, like that revenue architecture. Like it should live in the background, and that's where coaching your salespeople to treat customers as people ultimately. Is my screen sharing there? You see that? Let me try it again.
Good to see you, Pedro. Implemented
There we go.
lead 2 times, and it's working very well.
There it is.
It's a very powerful addition to the objects, for sure.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying it. But yeah, right. The things we agree on, the language that we use, internally is super important because we're going to naturally use that language somehow. It's going to leak out to the customer, and we want to make sure that it's in line. I'm not a big fan of the term lead. I don't generally like MQL, SQL, SAL. The thing is, though, is it's like when trying to explain the customer journey to internal stakeholders, there's so these terms are just so ingrained. And so,
especially when you bring them into HubSpot and then they see the word lead everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And so to bridge that gap, I wanted to build a structure that everyone understood, but there is a lot of coaching and defining of these terms in a way that is more customer centric. And, this simplified, diagram that I'm showing here, this bow tie, right, is your life cycle journey. These actually tailor pretty well to almost exactly to what our life cycle stages are within HubSpot. I kind of messed around with the term engaged, but ultimately people kept saying MQL. so we went with it, right? But this bow tie being our life cycle stages, there's kind of two we're familiar with the deal object, right? When they get to a certain stage, you create a deal. It might be, there's some differentiation on when different organizations decide to create a deal, but that deal gets associated to contacts and company records, right? And I look at the lead object as kind of the same thing. It's like a pre-deal, not funnel. What's the word I'm looking for? Stages, right? But it's just a little bit earlier in the journey, right? And for us, we look at the lead object, like the whole goal is to reach out to people, whether they have shown intent or we're reaching out to them cold and hoping to build intent. Like that lead serves the same purpose. And the ultimate kind of the closed won state of that lead object is to book a meeting and then create a deal.
Right. And itself it's like a pre-journey journey. Right?
Yeah.
And I remember when they first announced it, I was like, it's the only reason I'm okay with this is because it's actually a lead journey, object, and understanding that there can be multiple journeys from the same person or from the same company. And this is how you get around, challenges like, oh, they're already labeled as a customer. Now what, when they want to buy something else, right?
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's that's the beauty of that lead object and the deal object itself, right? It's beyond just a lead status property. This allows you to have cycles within cycles, right? So as I look at the life cycle stages, it's like this is the furthest someone has come along in their journey of understanding what we are and deciding whether or not we're the right solution, and then becoming a customer. It's the furthest along they've got, which is really important information. But you can have people in a MQL stage or an opportunity stage who have different levels, and maybe they've come through this process so many times before, and the lead object provides a way to track that, to meet them where they're at. Like if you know that that there's a lead that's been created who's already met with us, they've gone through a good portion of our deal stages, we know we're not starting back at the beginning with them. And it's kind of disrespectful to just be like, hey, by the way, this is what we are. Like, yeah, I know. Let's get on with it, right? And so it provides the information to be able to treat people like people ultimately, right?
Yeah. And where my mind goes there is I was just reminded of the deal property, new business or existing business.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like up to now, even up to right now, when we're talking about it, like that property's role is almost 100% reporting, right? Whereas if we were to treat it as a tag to say, okay, we treat this person differently in our process because this label exists. Yeah. Like, it helps when you have a little more than, one field or one drop down to help you do that.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah, informing your teams, based on these properties, like these labels. Yeah. So I think it's inescapable. Like we have, as much as we want to treat customers like people, ultimately, like they are data in our systems, and like how do you bridge that gap? And I think that the processes that we've been able to build between life cycle stages, the lead object, and some workflows, like allows us to bridge those gaps pretty well.
Yeah, and I remember our first conversation about this, and it just like speaks to the challenge that I think many of us are experiencing right now. And, I'll just say it, like, Salesforce has left a mess for people trying to do things the right way, to clean up. And the right way, usually when I say that, it's like actually customer centric, customer focused. Like, are we treating people like human beings, or are we trying to bring them into our systems and our processes because we need data, we need reporting, we need money, right? And part of this mess is the admin versus like user based approach. And when you approach everything from an admin and I need to see the data, that's when you make fields and you make stages that are specifically designed to achieve that goal of the data, instead of the goal of, are we providing the right experience, for not only for our customers but also for our internal teams to serve those buyers and customers the way we want them to.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a good point, because this system here that I've created works very well for our business. It's not going to work for everyone. I think it's relatively standard, though, for the most part. A couple tweaks here and there. But what it does allow for is automation, to where information and people are going to bubble up to the awareness of our sales team, of our marketing team, at the right time to meet the customer where they're at in their journey. So it does allow for just a better treatment of customers, right? So we know if a customer is their lead score bubbles up above a certain threshold, and we create a lead from that, and we attach all of the properties that the salesperson is going to need to see, so they can go to the lead in their prospecting workspace and see, here's a new lead. I can click on it. I can see where this came from. I can see what sort of interactions they've had. Was this from an event? Was this a hand raiser from a demo request on our website? And very quickly be able to say, okay, I know where this person's at. If I reach out and call, I'm gonna treat them as though they know at least this much about us, because I can see that, right?
Yeah. And now I remember where I was going with the other comment. It's like when we first talked, it was basically like a gut check conversation. Like, it's so hard to find best practice information that makes you feel good sometimes. Like, and this is one of those times where you're like, a common sense application of this object looks like this. I can't find any information anywhere that supports me wanting to do that. And I've had so many conversations with people related to HubSpot just like that. And that's ultimately, I think, why, we're so invested in this platform. Is it like, if there's a common sense way to do something, you can probably do it in HubSpot in that way. And when you choose to do it that way, know that you might not find a bunch of good resources out there to support it. But, what you've been telling me about the feedback you're getting is it just simplifies things in a lot of ways, just like you think common sense approaches would.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's the best route for us? So I can talk a bit about, kind of the overall processes that I think is a common sense approach, though it's only going to be a common sense approach for our particular business model. I think people can kind of adapt as they adapt to their own kind of situation as they think about this. But, what, my thoughts on this, I can kind of like walk through some scenarios and show, kind of talk about the automations that trigger and what happens at these particular stages.
Right.
And we can dive into each portion of that. But it really is like, this is combining multiple systems into a holistic customer journey. So.
Right. And I'll share my screen and we'll look at HubSpot just to show where we've been. Right. And this is changing, and a lot of people are noticing it in random spots. Like the sales certification now talks about this differently. But this model of subscriber lead, marketing qualified lead, sales qualified lead, opportunity customer evangelist. So this is a fresh portal, right? And this is what you get. And this has been the out of the box model since HubSpot began, right? And because of that, there's a lot of other functionality in the system driven by this one property. I think if you can speak to one of the challenges you're running into is like, how does this impact lifecycle reporting?
Yeah, I think that's it's such a linear process when you look at just life cycle stages, and also without people moving backwards through the life cycle stages. It's like, how do you determine, somebody who's made it to opportunity? Like, let's say you haven't engaged with them for a year, but then they come in and submit a demo request. Like, how do we track that happened, right? How do we give credit to marketing for that? And there's ways to do it, but how many times did they need to engage with sales or marketing before they moved to the next stage? Even, if you look at this model, something's only going to MQL one time, and that's it.
Right.
But we know that's not true.
I mean, look at how this statement is kind of funny. Stages are listed in the order contacts and companies will move through them. I'll give you that for a company. If we're talking about a company object, and we whenever anybody buys anything, that company is always a customer. But when it's the individuals, I mean, this is where we know that the buying journey is not linear, right? So even trying to apply it, represents its own challenges. So when you had this, what would be what were some ways, were there some immediate stage changes you would try to, update or?
Yeah. I mean, considering that people only go through, it's like, what is a subscriber? What is the difference between a subscriber and a lead, and how does someone move beyond that? Does it, for me, I was like, let me combine those two. And I didn't like the term lead. I got rid of it and just said, this is a contact record. We don't know enough about them to be anything other than that. This is just a record in our system.
So we're deleting subscriber. Done.
Yeah.
And that's where that subscriber stage made sense in 2006.
Sure. Yeah.
When your method of, acquiring email addresses, that was the goal, and you had a blog and you needed people to subscribe to the blog.
Yeah.
So yeah, you needed to define those people. That's not always the path anymore.
And then the next thing for me, as I go through the list, it's like, great, we have marketing qualified leads. Now there's a lot that happens between that stage and a sales qualified lead. And you can define those in many different ways. I added a step in between the two, which is sales accepted lead, because I wanted to mark the handoff between marketing and sales. And I wanted to see, because ultimately, for me, this is about conversion rates. What is moving through, and then determining those that aren't moving through, what's going on there, because there's you can diagnose issues with your go-to-market system if you have the ability to do that, right? So I threw an extra stage in there to yeah.
So where is it?
After that, yeah. So sales accepted lead, and then they'll work the lead through the lead stages. And then a sales qualified lead is someone who's agreed to move to the next step.
Okay. Which is opportunity.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
And then the next thing that I saw is that, this system, as you mentioned, has been built a long time ago. We've I guess go-to-market, in particular SaaS model, reoccurring revenue systems have changed a lot. And now we really emphasize the post-customer, the post-sale processes, recurring impact, renewals, expansions is such a big part of business. But it's like, what do we have there? We have evangelist. What does that even mean? Right? What is other? Other makes sense, but you have to define that. But really, it's like it's just a customer and that's it. That's not the end of the journey. Like recurring revenue, the journey never ends. Right. So you need extra stuff there, and that can, for me, I called it the renewal and expansion cycle. There's probably better names for it, but that was a stage that I added some, and then the ultimate goal, right, is to capture. Just prove so much impact to your customers that they want you on everything that they can possibly, every user using your product, the full breadth of all of your product that they can offer, right? So the ultimate end goal was LTV, lifetime value. I kind of had an end goal there.
Okay. So that was, you kind of replaced evangelist with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, I think that evangelist is like, it's great because you want people who are going to talk about you and refer you. And I just find that there's better ways to represent that than a life cycle stage, right?
Right.
Personally.
Yeah, much better ways.
Mhm.
And that's where like it's so easy. And this is where I love digging into like, the underlying problems. Like why are people having so much issues achieving goals related to upsell, cross-sell, resell?
Mhm.
It's like, here you go. If you can't like separate that out in the system and you got a sales team focused on that and this other team, maybe an inside sales team or a customer success team that all of a sudden has that metric on their head, but they don't own any of the contacts listed as customer.
Yep.
It's like, good luck, right? Of course you're not going to hit those goals.
Yep.
um,
Yeah, and there's so many cycles you can track within there. If you see that there's a company record that's associated with a deal, but they're in the renewal expansion lifecycle stage, you know that that deal is for a very specific thing. It is not the same as somebody in the opportunity stage who's not a customer yet, right? Just very easy to tell the story based on that extra information.
yeah.
And I actually removed, for me, I removed customer, or I actually just changed the name of customer to renewal expansion. And I added a stage in for onboarding because there's so much that happens there. And you do have people who do not make it through onboarding. And that's a very important thing to track. I also want to track the speed at which they move from closed won to renewal expansion, right? How long does it take them to get through onboarding? Very important metric for us.
So onboarding is between opportunity and renewal expansion.
Renewal expansion.
Okay. Right. So just bring this guy down here. Mm-hmm. And then this guy down here.
Yeah.
I like it because you might see things like, current client or a former client or things like that too. Way to differentiate. Okay, customers take different forms, right? After they become a customer.
Yep. Yeah, and you can have, and this is a whole nother can of worms to talk about, but whether you sync your contact records associated with company records that are customers, right? Do you keep them separate? Do you link them? It really depends on your business model. But if you have a business where you might have a company that's a customer, a logo, but you can sell to different departments, or you have a certain business model where it makes sense to disconnect your contact records from your company records as far as lifecycle stage goes, you can have different contacts within an onboarding period, depending on what you're selling to them. So,
right. And just to reiterate the challenge here, so when I went to edit evangelist, right, the name, big warning here, right? And if you don't and that's the whole reason for these calls where you just need one other person to tell you that this is going to be okay for you, right? And you're not going to break the system.
Yeah.
Because that's where these are the kinds of it's interesting. I usually say that HubSpot will put 3 things in front of you if you're about to delete something that's super important or break the system. This is only one, and it can have a huge impact on any of the reporting that you're used to be able to doing. And it says here, if you're currently using lifecycle stages to track things like conversion rate, a name change can lead directly to inaccuracy. So only change a stage name if the new stage is similar to the old one, like customer to client or lead to hot lead. Yeah, that's super similar.
I would not want that as life cycle stages.
Right. But that's where I think there's merit. And I try to give HubSpot the benefit of the doubt when I can. But when they come out with things like new as a stage, I'd love your take on that. I don't know if you saw that. I saw it in a post yesterday, but having a stage name new, what Why could that be good? Why could it be bad?
I mean, I like new for leads because it's a new lead, but lifecycle stage, I don't personally like it for lifecycle stages. It's like, I don't know. Why could that be good or bad? I just think it's kind of inaccurate. It's like that person has always existed in the world until like maybe when they're a baby, they were new.
Right. Well,
But
I think it opens the door, because another challenge we have here is like, what kind of relationships are we managing in this CRM, right? And I think there's plenty of use cases for why you'd want to manage non-sales relationships, right? Because the value of HubSpot is it's a communication management platform, like at its core, and it does it better than almost any other system like available, because it connects it to the revenue data and all the other initiatives of the business. And for me, that opens the door to say, hey, this is a new person to us. They might not represent revenue effectively, but all this, partner-led growth. We all know that events are easier to do, with a friend. So there's all these reasons to bring a non-sales contact into the system. For me, it shows like a slight opening in the door of like, oh, maybe we are moving away from lead. But that's even a great, like, we're moving on from subscriber, right? Because they haven't actually signed up for anything, but it's a person that we're interested in having a relationship with at the end of the day, right?
And I changed lead to contact because that's all it is. It's a contact record. Like that for me made more sense. Though it does add I get confused now because I came up in sales, working in Salesforce, and they do lead. What do they do? I can't remember what they do because I've changed it in my own head to make sense with what I do. But I have contact and then MQL SAL.
Right. Yeah, and that's like one of the many challenges when they first came out with this. It's like, we've been having that conversation for years. If you're in HubSpot and you had to work with Salesforce, their lead object is basically, people see that, they treat it like it's a contact. And sometimes they don't even create a contact, right? Because that system's based around accounts, specifically. So that's usually the only requirement, is this has to be turned into an account.
Yeah.
And at that point, you don't really worry about all of the, the duplication, because you're not even, it could be the same five requests, right, from the same person, but it's still leading to one company. And it was a clean system in that way. But as soon as you involve, people and the contact information you need to do business with them, it's a mess. And I've never actually seen one that didn't have a bunch of bad data in it, and no clarity over when you create a lead versus when you created a contact, right? And any, like, for me, I always knew like the veteran sales guys, because they didn't mess with leads at all. They, like, if I meet a guy and I don't want to, like, it's a contact, right? And I just wrecked your whole system of lead tracking, right? So yeah, I'm excited to see things like that. They actually made this change, I think it was last year sometime, the ability to start customizing this stuff.
And I think the complication here is less like that warning that you get for like reporting. I think that warning might be appropriate if it's like, look, this might mess up some automations that you've got in the background. You're going to need to rebuild your automations, and that's can be a somewhat complicated thing, because which I do. We have some time tomorrow that I wanted to discuss, like, how do you build these automations so that they flow and that you've got accurate, you can monitor all this stuff, right? And have accurate life cycle stages for your customers.
Yeah. Prospects. And I'll just give some props to Andrew here. Like, props to all the people who have bent over backwards to make the Salesforce data model integrate with the HubSpot data model. Not an easy thing to do. Um, so that makes sense. Man, that was a quick 30 minutes.
It was, yeah. Yeah.
And tomorrow, I think we have a foundation to work from on speaking about the lead.
Yep.
Because that's really what, like, all this stuff, right? And we haven't talked about the deal yet, right? Which I think makes sense, because I think part of your transition, and this will lead into tomorrow, is you've transitioned a little bit away from relying on lifecycle stage reporting. Yes,
I have. Yeah. Yeah. It's still important, but it's much less important.
Right. So tomorrow we'll talk about that switch to, lead plus deal, reporting kind of taking over for that. And, you can share some tips about how we'll set that up here. And yeah, should be a good time. Like, I love this topic too, even though I don't like the word, but this is about managing the customer lifecycle from start to finish. And as a business, you're in complete control of how you do this, right? And know that the way you set up your internal systems, you probably have people that don't like it at all, and you're wondering why they won't adopt, the system. Some of this stuff just makes no sense, right? Like, if I have a customer ready to buy, and you ask me to create them as a lead and then put them through this process just so I can get my quote and you can have your data, like, I'm not signing up for that if I don't have to. Right. And so we'll talk more about that tomorrow. And it's a great conversation, man. Thanks so much for joining the show.
Yeah, always a pleasure talking to you, Chris.
All right, man. So as we go towards tomorrow, take a look at your life cycle stages. Maybe take a peek at the lead settings, especially if you haven't clicked the button yet. There's no harm in turning it on, I don't think. And let's find that opportunity and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.
All right. See you.